The cruelty, the violence, the impunity with which they act, practically every defining feature of the second Trump administration and the efforts to hold Team Trump accountable collided in a Chicago courtroom today. A federal judge sharply questioning top Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino over brutal tactics federal agents have used against protesters and journalists in Chicago, especially in the wake of her order that puts limits on the use of tear gas by immigration authorities. The Chicago Sun-Times reporting that Judge Sarah Ellis told Bovino, quote, "It is difficult for me to see that the force being used is necessary to stop an immediate and serious threat of physical harm to a person." At times, Judge Ellis was sharply critical about how Bovino handled incidents between residents and federal agents. Ellis saying, quote, "That was the instance as well where children were present and they were dressed up in their Halloween costumes. Those kids were tear gassed on their way to celebrate Halloween in their local school parking lot. These kids, you can imagine their sense of safety was shattered on Saturday, and it's going to take a long time for that to come back, if ever." Residents, journalists, and protesters laid out multiple alarming incidents by federal agents. Enrique Bahena submitted to the court this picture after he was shot by a pepper ball from just 5 feet away. He says he was on his way to work when he witnessed federal officers holding guns and advancing on a crowd. Combat veteran Chris Gentry says that, quote, "As agents were driving away, they pointed a pepper ball gun and then a real gun as he was lawfully standing on the side of the road, voicing his opposition as agents were driving by in their vehicles. The agent who pointed the real gun at Mr. Gentry's face said, 'Bang, bang,' and 'You're dead, liberal.' That just a portion of the allegations that federal officers are facing in Chicago. When questioned about specific incidents, Bovino dodged, saying, quote, "I believe that each situation is dependent on the situation." The judge then ordering Bovino to appear in court every day at 6 p.m. to face questions from the judge. A federal judge pushing back against overreach by the Trump administration is where we start today. Joining me now, Director of Communications and Public Policy for ACLU of Illinois, Adyanka, is here. Also with us, Vice President for Immigration Policy and Campaigns at Forward.us, Andrea Flores, plus MSNBC senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin is here. All right, Lisa, walk us through what happened today in court.
So, Alicia, Gregory Bovino, before he even got to talk, had to listen to Judge Sarah Ellis, make sure that they were on the same page about what her temporary restraining order required. She read it thoroughly to make sure that it wasn't just a question of willful disobedience of the temporary restraining order or not understanding or reading it, but that she and Bovino both had the same baseline understanding of what she had ordered. And then she went through with him some of the evidence that the plaintiffs had presented, some of which you already referred to, declarations by people in the neighborhood, declarations by people who were there to protest and saw and or experienced deadly force being pointed at them or pepper balls being aimed at them. You showed that picture of Enrique Bahena with the pepper ball welt in his neck. And she asked him a series of questions about whether certain instances would violate the TRO. He generally did not give much ground. And I want to read to you from the transcript if I can. She was talking about some guy, this is Judge Sarah Ellis, some guy standing on the street in front of his house or next to his car, most of the time, absent something unusual, is not presenting such a risk, meaning a risk of force being used against law enforcement officers that puts them in imminent danger, such that deadly force is appropriate if he's just standing next to his car. Bovino's response is, well, yes, ma'am, Your Honor. Again, that would be situationally dependent. I would have to understand what that individual was doing or what was happening before I could make a definitive assessment on how I would respond to a situation like that. So Gregory Bovino really not giving up much in terms of, are there situations where under no circumstances would it be appropriate to use deadly force, much less tear gas? But as you also noted, Gregory Bovino has to show up each workday between now And the November 5th preliminary injunction hearing, that's where the plaintiffs in this case will ask Judge Ellis to enter a much longer-term order that would prohibit some of the use of force that they have contested thus far. Not only the use of chemical munitions, but, for example, putting people in chokeholds, or the way in which they disperse crowds without warnings, whether or not they can show up without clearly identifiable markers for individual law enforcement officers. One of the complaints has been, we don't even know who these people are. We can't tell what agency they're with, much less what their name is. And so Judge Ellis reiterating today that they must wear in a conspicuous place at least 2 identifying markers. And then, of course, she extracted one important concession from Bovino, which is that despite her order that all of the CBP and ICE officers on the ground need to be wearing body cams, that he himself, despite being a part of the action, was not wearing one, but that he will do so by Friday, Alicia.
Andrea, let's pick up on that point, Bovino not wearing a body camera. Does that strike you as unusual?
It doesn't, because we're talking about the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection, and these officers are trained for a different mission than what we're seeing in Chicago. They are supposed to be guarding our nation's boundaries. They're supposed to be dealing with, drug cartels and threats that are very, very different than what happens in our communities. So I am deeply alarmed by the growth and Border Patrol leadership taking over these operations in cities, because ICE is a deeply imperfect agency in need of reform, but they have a long history of working with local police departments. They work with local, non-governmental organizations. And so Border Patrol doesn't have those relationships, right? They were trained for a different mission, and they are essentially a paramilitary force meant to be at our borders, not in our communities.
Well, let's talk about that, because we have that reporting, Andrea, from MSNBC. You got field directors, special agents in charge in multiple cities expecting to be replaced by Border Patrol officials. So this is now becoming part of a larger pattern. Why do you believe that is happening, and what is it going to mean for American cities?
Well, I would say that there are more constraints generally that ICE is used to operating under, right? There's more checks and balances within ICE as an agency than there ever has been for Border Patrol. And we need to connect the dots of the announcements that they're making. So last week they said that they were going to have the Navy, they entered a contract with the Navy to build multiple soft-sided facilities, the type of detention facilities that we've seen in border areas during really, really big migration surges. Now they're going to be outside of our cities. And those are spaces that are operated by the Border Patrol. So they're really bringing these border tactics deep into our communities that are completely ill-equipped to serve any sort of public safety interest when it comes to civil immigration enforcement, right? What you need to combat someone, who is a human smuggler is very different than what you need for someone who has a basic civil immigration violation. But they are building an infrastructure to bring this untrained paramilitary force to do domestic policing on behalf of the president's goals.
I mean, listen, Ed, Judge Ellis is clearly doing what she can to hold the line inside her courtroom. I am curious about how that is translating on the streets of Chicago. I remember earlier this month you told Nicole ICE agents they were out of control in Chicago. Has anything changed on the ground since then?
No, and in fact, I think that's one of the reasons that Bovino was called into court today. What we've seen over the last few days are, heavy-handed tactics and, violent activities on the part of ICE and CPB, not just in one part of the city, not just aimed at, a particular group or particular part of the city, but in a variety of parts of the city. Again, always met with the same opposition, and then that opposition always bringing out these tactics of the use of tear gas, the use of threats, the use of physical violence when they found it necessary. The fact is that the Halloween party event that the judge made reference to this morning took place in a very quiet neighborhood in Chicago that, was not really the target of these raids heretofore. It is clear that they are becoming both more aggressive and more expansive in terms of where they're going. And I think that that what we see is a judge who's paying attention and wants to hear each and every day where, when, how, and why these raids are taking place, and to check and to be able to test whether or not the force that's being used is necessary.
The force that is being used necessary. And Lisa, at whose direction and in whose name? Court filings cite comments Bovino made to a reporter as evidence of his disregard for the law. Let's listen to them, and then we'll talk about them on the other side.
I take my orders from the executive branch, yes. Whether that's President Trump or Secretary Noem.
So, one, Lisa, does that comport with your understanding of the law? Doesn't he still have an obligation to abide by the courts?
That's absolutely true. And Judge Ellis sort of subtly reminded him of that today. Alicia, at the beginning of the hearing, she said, as a member of the executive branch, you, Commander Bovino, have a different role to play than I do in the judicial branch. And then she continued, my role is not to tell you that you can or cannot enforce validly passed laws by Congress. That's not my role. I have no intention of doing that. But then she continued, my role is simply to see that in the enforcement of those laws, that you and the agents operating under you are acting in a manner that is consistent with your obligation under the law, meaning that it's consistent with the Constitution, it's consistent with federal law, it's consistent with the consent decree that's operating here, that it's consistent with the TRO that I entered. Again, Judge Sarah Ellis very subtly reminding him, you may take your orders from the executive branch, but at all times, the executive branch still has to be in compliance with the boundaries of the law as I interpret them as the district court judge in charge of this matter. And of course, we all owe fidelity to the Constitution. That's as true of me as the federal judge overseeing this and my oath as it is of you, Commander Bovino.